Hello and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis. And it is Cowboys week, a couple days to the Cowboy game. In fact, this is being recorded on Friday. Before we get to the preview, we're going to be discussing roster moves, the potential for a wide receiver trade, some bad stats for the 49ers, either holistically on offense and defense or for individual players. Then we will get into the preview. Cowboys at Niners Sunday night on NBC, 8:15 Eastern. We're going to be talking injuries, how the Niners have owned this series recently, players, stats, rankings, keys to the game, and I will make a prediction. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. And I mentioned up front, we're going to be talking about some roster moves that the Niners have made. The Niners a few days ago made it official, putting Brandon Ayuk on IR. In a corresponding move, they signed defensive tackle Evan Anderson to the 53-man roster, not an elevation, an actual, hopefully permanent promotion. And that was done for a few reasons. One, the roster spot's available, right? D tackle, even though they do have 4 on the roster, Kevin Givens is dealing with a groin injury. Jordan Elliott has been dealing with a knee injury or a knee issue. Elliott's not on the injury report. Givens is questionable. So in case Givens can't go, at least Evans is there. He is one of the Niners' better run-stuffing defensive tackles, and he has been elevated twice already from the practice squad. If it was a standard elevation, then after this Cowboy game, the Niners would have to make a decision whether to release him or then after the game sign him to the 53-man roster. So coincidentally, the Ayuk injury opening up a roster spot for Anderson. And I've seen a lot on social media about why Evan Anderson wasn't promoted sooner. And he is the biggest defensive tackle the Niners have, 6'3", about 330 pounds, has not played a ton of snaps when he's been active or on the game day roster. He's played about 20 snaps, which for an undrafted rookie free agent behind the likes of Javon Hargrave, Collins, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, T.Y. McGill also on the practice squad with him, that's a good showing. But on social, people have been asking, why wasn't Evan Anderson promoted sooner? It's because he had those other people ahead of him, and he did get promoted. And he and T.Y. McGill, I think McGill only has 1 elevation, whereas Anderson had 2 elevations prior to the promotion to the 53-man roster. There's better players in front of him. The Niners weren't going to entrust week 2, 3, 4 an actual roster spot to Evan Anderson, even though he had promising work, right? The arrow is trending up for Evan Anderson in spot duty. He was not going to take the place of any one of the 4 defensive tackles on the roster. And with the Hargrave injury, that obviously changed things. But the Niners and Nick Sorensen, Brandon Staley, and Kyle still needed to see more before committing a roster spot to him. And I think at this point now, 7 games in, and he hasn't been obviously available for all 7 games or playing all 7 games, they've seen enough to make that elevation. So the Niners have 53 on the roster with Anderson. It's going to be interesting, though, in the coming weeks, the bye week, I guess, included, but then obviously after that at Tampa and Seattle and other games, what they do roster-wise when McCaffrey comes back, when Greenlaw comes back, if Hufanga comes back. That's not a guarantee. The Niners, based on the report, are not optimistic that Hufanga can return from torn wrist ligaments, but Hufanga's agent is saying he's going to come back and play with the cast. Of course he is. Hufanga's a free agent after the season. He wants to put good tape on film, missing about a third of last season with a torn ACL, obviously missing the first, 4+ games of this season, recovering from the torn ACL. He wants to maximize his value going to free agency. And I can't blame him. I just don't know if that's in the Niners' best interest reactivating him. 1, if he's injured. 2, is there really a significant drop off at this point right now. Hufanga post knee injury, Hufanga post wrist injury between him and Malik Mustafa. Yes, Hufanga's the former all-pro player 2 years ago, coming off of the knee, and I still maintain that Hufanga is one of the players that's going to be gone. I mean, do you want Hufanga at $15 to $20 million a year or Malik Mustafa at $1 million a year? You're not going to get obviously 15 to 20 times the production. They're both very good tacklers. They're both spotty in coverage. They both play out of control at times. And that's Hufanga's play style. He is a veteran versus Malik being, activated or getting playing time in only 7 games so far. Wishing nothing ill on Hufanga at all. I just don't think he's going to be in the Niners' future plans, whether he is able to play or not. But again, you have to make decisions on if you bring Hufanga in or back, like McCaffrey, which is guaranteed, like Greenlaw, which is guaranteed at some point, I would think, like Yetur Gross-Matos. There's 4 players on a 53-man roster that you have to get rid of. So something for us to keep an eye on during or after the bye week. Now, some practice squad moves as well. Niners wound up bringing Nesta Jade Silvera, a defensive tackle, to the practice squad, released defensive end Jonathan Garvin. Silvera, 6'2", 310-pound defensive tackle from Arizona State. He was drafted in the 7th round in 2023, I believe. More beef for the line if needed. So Anderson gets elevated up. They bring someone to take his spot at the exact same position, run stuffing defensive tackle. I was surprised, though, that defensive end Jonathan Garvin was released. I mean, they released him from the practice squad once or twice already, and no one claimed him. So it's not like Garvin is a hot commodity, but the only other defensive end on the practice squad is Alex Barrett. And the way that the Niners DN rotation has not been super impressive with Bosa, Floyd, Robert Beal, and Sam Okewanu, I figured another DN on the practice squad would be more important than, say, having someone like Tariq Owens, who has less than zero, of seeing the 53-man roster. And Tariq is not going to be an in-demand name, right? They still have Trent Taylor as a receiver on the practice squad. They brought Malik Turner back, former Cowboy, among other teams, onto the practice squad. Those are obviously, if injuries beset the wide receiver room, those two are going to get called up before they even consider calling up Tariq Owens. So just an interesting choice in terms of who they let go, letting go a player at a position. If you want to call it of need or a thin position at D end, I would have kept Garvin on the practice squad. Now, from actual roster moves to potential roster moves, will the 49ers make a move for a receiver after this game? And it's a good time too, right? The bye week to bring someone in, get someone acclimated. I'm sure Lynch is making calls regarding players that could be available. Who we know is not available is DeAndre Hopkins, going to the Chiefs for a 5th round pick that could be a 4th. Would he have been the cure-all savior for San Francisco? No, I think he has obviously a greater chance to make that type of impact for Kansas City, especially starting this week, since Juju Smith-Schuster's out with a hamstring injury. They're going to miss Rashee Rice for the rest of the year, and Hollywood Brown might not return until December or January. So an immediate, and Sky Moore was put on IR as well. So an absolute immediate need. One of the wide receiver holes gets filled with DeAndre Hopkins. He might not have had that much of an impact in San Francisco, given Debo might be playing. Jennings is being questionable, and he probably will miss. But at least having other viable receivers on the roster, Pearsall, Conley, Cowing, and Ronnie Bell. But if you bring DeAndre Hopkins in, Ronnie Bell's gone. And I think a lot of us want that, but I think Kyle Shanahan holds him in higher esteem than the fandom does. Now, the Niners did work out former Tampa Bay Buccaneer and Falcon receiver Russell Gage recently. No new news on that, at least as of this recording. He tore his patellar tendon August of 2023. So he's 14 months removed from that surgery, but it's the same injury that defensive end Drake Jackson suffered last year and could not come back from. Now, if that's due to the fact that Jackson is just a bigger guy, I don't know. I mean, how much more strain is going to be put on the tendon for a receiver versus a D end? I don't know if there was complications, an infection for any reason, but Jackson wasn't healing as quickly as the Niners would have hoped. And obviously his season's done. Russell Gage, if healthy, I think is a good option. If he becomes your fourth or fifth receiver, you could do a lot worse than Russell Gage. And if he bumps Ronnie Bell off, I mean, that's a plus too. And he's a better receiver at this point than Ronnie Bell. He would just, whoever they bring in probably would have to play special teams. And someone like a DeAndre Hopkins obviously wasn't going to do that. That's not to say that, Chris Conley couldn't, or, Jacob Cowan's a little bit small for gunner duties. But other receivers, as we mentioned last podcast, Adam Thielen from the Carolina Panthers coming off of a hamstring injury. I'm not sure if he's activated this week for their game. Deontay Johnson at Denver, actually. Another Panther receiver they can look at, Darius Slayton from the Giants and Mike Williams from the Jets. Christian Kirk from the Panthers, dynamic if they want to take on some salary. Kendrick Bourne from the Patriots was activated last week. They got a couple catches. For New England, who's not going to be available is Cooper Kupp, and it was floated out there for possibly a second-round pick with the Rams winning last night against the Vikings at 3-4. There's no reason for the Rams to break that up. And the fact that, a 2-5 team trading Cooper Kupp, you can maybe understand. McVay may look at that team, and if the season continued to go south, might have retired after this year. And if that's the case, then maybe, I don't know if it would be McVay personally, but ownership and the GM maybe wants to stockpile picks and set the table for whoever the next incoming coach would be as well as possible, knowing that they still have Nakua and Matthew Stafford and Williams at running back. But even the Matt Stafford news, just quickly, the fact that it was floated out that he was potentially going to be traded to the Vikings. Why? One, if you were the Vikings, why would you do that? I mean, Darnold was completely adequate and was not the reason why they lost that game. Matt Stafford and the offense throwing 4 touchdowns was beating Brian Flores' defense was the reason why they lost that game. Maybe hearing myself saying it out loud is one of the reasons maybe why you make that trade. But quarterback didn't seem to be a dire necessity for Minnesota. And I'm not sure why the Rams would have let Stafford go unless they could have gotten a haul for him. Maybe you bring Darnold back in a trade. And if it was a money thing, that a cap thing or money thing in the future, that could have been maybe the only reason why. But the Rams at 3-4 are going to be a problem moving forward in the NFC West. And as of right now, even though the Rams and Vikings kicked off the week, the Niners are currently in last in the NFC West. That trade deadline being shortly after the 49ers bye or their game against the Buccaneers, or right around there. It's a good time to bring a receiver, and it's a good time to bring anybody in. And Shanahan has verbalized leaning towards keeping the 6 wide receivers they have. Again, if they had multiple long-term wide receiver injuries, and they do have multiple wide receiver injuries and illnesses, Juwan Jennings probably not going to play, did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, not sure about practice Friday because that hasn't happened yet as of this recording. And Debo getting some conditioning work in after being hospitalized for pneumonia. If I said on a buddy's podcast, you have to game plan for Debo to not play, because you can't have another instance where, the game plan was highly reliant upon McCaffrey or Debo or Ayuk, and then that player is out and then everything goes to shit, which is still confusing to me. The way Kyle preaches positionless football, you would think that if there is an injury or someone's out, you just plug someone else in positionless football to perform those same duties Maybe not as admirably or not to 100%, but enough that you don't have to scrap your game plan completely. But for my money, maybe they bring in defensive end help. And Zadarius Smith of the Cleveland Browns, since, well, they're not necessarily in fire sale mode, they just got rid of Amari Cooper to Buffalo, was floated that he could potentially be had for a fourth or possibly third round pick. If that's the case, you do it 10 times out of 10, especially the way that the Niners have been drafting in the third round recently. They're better drafting 5, 6, and 7 than they are 2, 3, and 4. And I would even float out there Chase Young. I know fans have had some issues with the hustle, and he put it out there on tape, right? But he is having a pretty decent season so far for the Saints. The season would be roughly half over, so they would only owe maybe $5 or $6 million on whatever New Orleans still owes him on his contract. And depending on the pick that they give back, New Orleans may eat some more of that salary. He's a disruptive force. He's Debo on defense. Does Debo give, Deadpool maximum effort every time he runs around? No. And that's not okay. It's not like, well, Debo does it, so Chase Young could do it, but he could potentially be an option. I mean, look at the Seahawks acquiring Ernest Jones from the Titans. The Titans traded with the Rams in the offseason for an above average pass rusher, a pretty darn good pass rusher. The Titans are shit. They traded Hopkins. They traded Jones to Seattle. So now Seattle gets a legit pass rusher, because everybody knows with the, looking at it, that right now the NFC West is completely up for grabs. Seattle's 4-3. Everybody else is 3-4. It's anybody's division except maybe the Cardinals. If you had to rank them, right, you probably put Arizona at the bottom. And the Niners need to win the remaining 3 NFC West games, hosting Seattle, the Rams, and at Arizona last week of the season, to have a chance at winning the West, in addition to winning, let's say, 3 or 4 other games, hopefully starting with this one with Dallas. But I would look at defensive end, and there's probably more DN names out there and maybe lesser known names than these. So I think Zadarius Smith and Chase Young, though, these are 260, 265 plus pound defensive ends that give them another look and can set the edge a bit better than someone like Leonard Floyd can. Yetur Gross-Matos is still probably 2 to 4 weeks away from returning. I don't think he's going to be back right after the bye week. The more bodies at defensive end, the better, especially since Sorensen, it doesn't look like he's getting away from that rush 4 mentality and barely blitz. And when you do, it's a shit-ass blitz that doesn't get home anyway. So gave, I guess, a little downer preview of something negative the Niners are doing. Let's get into bad Niners stats. And I'm sure you guys have seen some of these, but I compiled them. Lowlights, lowest hits of how the Niners are performing this year. Let's just start with Kyle. I'm sure you guys have seen this. Shanahan, either as an assistant coach or a head coach, is 1-16 versus Steve Spagnuolo, Brian Flores, and Jim Schwartz. The only win he had was against Schwartz, and I'm not sure if that was as a head coach or an assistant coach. What I go back to in terms of what Kyle has said about the cover 3, the rushing 4, making it difficult on a quarterback to play. And the Niners have apparently a very high pass defense grade from PFF when they rush 4, and they are worse in the league or close to it. I forget what the updated ranking is when they are blitzing. But remember, sometimes if they're categorizing a more than 5-man blitz, it happens so rarely, and it's so poorly thought out, and it's not disguised, and it doesn't get home. So that part's not surprising. The fact that the Niners are tops or close to the top in the league in pass defense efficiency is surprising, because we watch the games and it doesn't really look like that. But Kyle's fascination or infatuation with the scheme, I still maintain, is an infatuation that's maybe 7 to 10 years old at this point or more. Teams have found a way to beat it. Good quarterbacks, top 10, top 12 quarterbacks will more than likely find a way to beat it, especially as the game wears on and as the defense and D-line tires. So while this is a defense that Kyle looks to run, I feel like it's a defense that is a defense that he had problems with in the past. The defenses he has problems with right now are Spagnuolo, Flores, and Schwartz. So with the individual talent, and I've said this on other podcasts, and I don't want to say I'm going to keep saying it till a change is made, because there's one, I influence nothing for the 49ers. I don't influence that much in my own goddamn house, let alone for the 49ers. So it's not going to prompt any sort of defensive change unless something ridiculously bad happens during the Cowboy game, which forces them to take a harder look at their scheme. And even then, it's an evolution, not a revolution, in terms of what they're going to do. But these are the defenses that gives an offensive genius problems, Spagnuolo, Flores, and Schwartz. So why not employ that with your very talented via individual players defense versus what they are employing? That's point one. Point two being, the line's not getting home. If this defense is predicated on getting sacks, getting home, generating significant pressure, collapsing the pocket, they're not doing that. So to me, there's multiple reasons why this defense needs to be, I'll go short of saying the word overhauled, because that implies bringing in a bunch of new players and a drastically different scheme. I still think it is somewhere between a tweak and a minor overhaul of what they need to do. If you guys watched the Rams and Viking game last night, you heard Kirk Herbstreit say, the Vikings have a bunch of, they brought in like 4 or 5 different players, different starters, from the previous year's defense, whether it was, free agency or the draft, or I guess those would be the practice squad. I guess those would be like the 3 main avenues. And they are performing. You don't need high-end talent to run Brian Flores' scheme or Jim Schwartz's scheme or Steve Spagnuolo's scheme. Are we going to sit and say that those 3 teams have top 5 talent on their defensive roster? They have some nice players in parts, but as a whole, at every level, probably not, right? So Kyle struggling against certain defenses, but will not employ it himself. Just food for thought. I'm probably going to keep saying it on future podcasts. Let's stay with the defense. Red zone. They are 23rd in the NFL. So what is that? Bottom quarter? They are 26th in fourth quarter points allowed this year. Last season, as a whole, not just through 7 weeks, but as a whole, when the season ended, they were best in allowing the fewest number of points in the fourth quarter under a much maligned Steve Wilks. Go figure, right? How much of a leash will Kyle have for Nick Sorensen versus Steve Wilks? And there's no race thing involved here. Let's just, people probably aren't even thinking that, but let's just get that out of the way. If Steve Wilks gets fired after helping the 49ers get to a Super Bowl, yes, some questionable decisions in that game in the second half, the fourth quarter, and overtime. Some questionable decisions throughout the regular season. The Viking game, that all-out blitz at the end of the half and playing way too soft, sometimes in the secondary. His defense, and Sorensen's got 10 more games to prove himself, right? But if the Niners do not, I don't want to say if they don't get to a Super Bowl and win it, Sorensen's fired. That's drastic. That's ridiculous. But when Shanahan takes a step back after the season, hopefully after the playoffs, however far the Niners hopefully go, unless there's some strides being made, significant strides, they're going to have to make a change again. And fans will be clamoring for Robert Saleh, who is now with the Packers on the offensive staff in a fluid role, help giving LaFleur some offensive pointers, but from a defensive POV. So I don't know if Saleh would necessarily come back, but for those of us that are hoping for some sort of schematic evolution on defense, is Robert Saleh really the defensive coordinator you would want? If the Jets season continues to go south, I think you take a long, hard look at Jeff Ulbrich, because that means Ulbrich's gone. probably isn't retained a defensive coordinator, or that's just awkward. Interim head coach, oh, we're bringing someone else in, so you're going to go back to defensive coordinator. I mean, I guess if Nathaniel Hackett could swallow his pride and be demoted from OC to whatever the hell he is now, maybe that could happen with Jeff Ulbrich, but maybe that's someone that you bring in. Talent-wise, the Jets personnel probably comparable to San Francisco, but at least they run an aggressive scheme. This is probably where I want to be, a comparable cover 3 scheme, but with a bit more aggression, a bit more getting after the quarterback. So let's go Jets. Tank, tank, tank. And I'm sure a lot of Jet fans feel that way as well. For the draft pick, getting Aaron Rodgers out of there, maybe just a hard reset for this team. And maybe, I don't want to say you throw the farm at Ulbrich because that would be a little crazy, but you make it really enticing. Come on back to San Francisco, right? The team that drafted you, linebacker out of Hawaii for however many years. That would be my vote right now for whatever it's worth. Now let's flip to the offense. Let's start with red zone. Dead zone, 27th in the league. Jordan Mason, I want to say he's part of the problem, but the running game in the red zone is part of the problem. And the closer you get to the goal line, the worse it gets. I don't know if this is the dark red zone, the crimson zone, the maroon zone. You guys have probably seen this stat. Jordan Mason inside the 5 has 7 carries for -1 yard and a touchdown. Obviously, it gets harder to run the ball. Not for teams like the Cowboys in the 90s and the Chargers when they had LaDainian Tomlinson, right? For fantasy football purposes, when the Chargers got inside the 5, it was almost guaranteed that Tomlinson was going to run it in. There's nothing close to it's guaranteed that the Niners probably aren't going to run it in unless it's a sneak by Brock, and he had two QB sneaks last week against the Chiefs, but they're not moving players off the ball. Steve Young came out and said he wants to see more creativity offensively. I don't recall if he said specifically in the end zone or inside the 10 or 5, but the red zone has been a problem. Maybe this is where they utilize Cowing and Pearsall's route running and agility and quick twitch nature. It'll get better, obviously, when McCaffrey comes in, but for a team that likes to run the ball, that still has, at least going into the Chiefs game before Debo and Ayuk were hurt, enough talent that red zone should not be 27th. They should not have such difficulty running it inside the 5. Fourth quarter scoring, 20th. Actually, no, 26th. I'm sorry. And the O-line, these are Pro Football Focus grades versus last year. Trent Williams performing worse this year. Aaron Banks performing worse this year. Jake Brendel performing better. Dominic Puny performing better than Spencer Burford, and Colton McKivitz actually performing better than what he was last year. So this was on a scale from, I guess, 0 to 100, where the grade or the rating of a 50 was average. Only 2 offensive linemen were considered above average. Trent Williams, who I believe was at a 73, and Dominic Puny, who was, I believe, at a 57. The other 3 were under 50. Now, when you look at the grades in sum, the sum total of this year's offensive line is better per Pro Football Focus than the sum total of last year's offensive line, whatever that's worth. The right-hand side of the line, so Puny and McKivitz versus Burford and McKivitz, is significantly better than what they got out of the offensive line last year. From 0 to 100, Burford was a 2, and I think McKivitz was a 4. Now, I'm not sure why Feliciano wasn't on there based on what I saw, but Burford and McKivitz last year, and I wonder what the grade would have been if on hike, both of those 2 players just didn't block anybody and just laid down. How you can get a score in the single digits in under 5 is appalling, and they were trying. I think McKivitz this year is in the 30s, and Puny, like I said, is mid-50s, 57. So the left side has regressed, and you still have Trent Williams. And if he's not playing like the number one left tackle or offensive tackle in the league, he's obviously playing like a top 5. So you're still good there. Aaron Banks probably not going to be back next year. They could probably find a free agent or a rookie if they get lucky with someone like Dominic Pooney again, or a Ben Barch, who they have on the roster if they sign him to a 1-year deal, to get something comparable for a whole lot less than what Aaron Banks would demand on the open market. Not saying that he's a bad player, but even if he's making $5 million a year, if you can get something comparable for 2.5, or 3, got to consider that. And I don't think anybody's going to be holding a candle for Aaron Banks anyway. Now, Brock Purdy individually. So we have some advanced metrics in terms of his completion percentage versus man and zone. Obviously, we know that completion percentage versus zone is better. Let's start with man. 41% completion percentage versus man ranks 33rd in the NFL, which means he is outside of all starting quarterbacks. And his rating, traditional passer rating, 59.3, which is 32nd. Versus zone, a lot better, completing 74% of his passes, which is 6th overall. And his rating is number 1, 130.7, which is going to beg the question. I'm going to say it again when we get into the Dallas section. Why would teams play zone? Why would defenses play a majority zone against Purdy and right now an undermanned wide receiver core? Definitely against Dallas. Jennings is probably not going to play, and Debo is going to be probably limited at best, and no Ayuk, and then rookies behind them in Pearsall and Cowing. Even if you don't have the secondary the Chiefs do or the Ravens from last year do, wouldn't you just roll the dice and say, beat me? Show that you can beat me. And the Niners are still, or Purdy, number 1 in air yards. So that's not only air yards per completion, but air yards per attempt, balls that fall incomplete, how far he is pushing the ball, Brock Purdy, beyond the line of scrimmage. Now, another stat that you may know of, maybe not the exact number, wide receiver target separation. Bad. Meaning the wide receiver, whether it's a wide receiver, actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if this means also a tight end, also a fullback, also a running back, or purely a wide receiver. But target separation, that person that Brock Purdy is targeting, separation from the nearest defensive player, 68th in the NFL. So you're going to go through 2 full sets of starting quarterbacks, 32 again, and then you get a couple after that to Purdy at 68. It's a thing, guys. The Niners not being able to separate is a thing. And again, if you're a defense upcoming on the schedule, why would you not run more man against San Francisco, right? Roll the dice. It's not like the Niners are some 6-1 juggernaut team. They're a 3-4 team. They're playing like a 3-4 team. At some point, they'll get healthier. They'll have a fully healthy Debo. They'll have Jennings. They'll have McCaffrey. Cowing and Pearsall, you would imagine in time are going to grow into their roles, be more comfortable, and get better. What that looks like from a number of handoffs of, Cowing getting any jet sweeps, God forbid, or receptions between he and Pearsall, I don't know. I'm not going to, sit here and say, Pearsall should have, 4 catches per game here on out. That would be great. That would be him ending up with 40 plus receptions on the season, which I think with a healthy Niner team, there was no chance he was going to have that because he's 4th. He would have been 4th behind Ayuk, Debo, and Jennings. But moving forward, that would be great. I want to see it before I see some consistency out of him before making, that type of proclamation. But what's Brock's recourse here, right? Is he not going to throw into tight windows? He's going to have to, I don't want to say force it, but Brock might not have a choice. And you can't, we're not going to sit here and say on every single route, every single receiver is locked down. 1 or 2 of the receivers is probably getting a bit more separation than elsewhere on the field. That just then becomes a matter of Brock identifying the most favorable matchup, not zeroing in on it, not staring it down. You don't want to do that from a defensive standpoint or tip balls or someone stepping in front of it for an interception. But that target separation number and ranking will improve. One, obviously, if the receivers can separate more, but then two, if Brock can identify the best matchup, the most open matchup. And again, that's something that McCaffrey coming back will help with. Jennings coming back will help with. But it's a thing. And Brock does not shy away from difficult throws, pushing the ball downfield. He has, he doesn't have the arm of a gunslinger, but he has the gunslinger mentality. And in a way, for someone who has to throw with as much anticipation that he does, he needs to rely on that more for these tight window throws than being able to pepper it in there like a Stafford, a Mahomes, and Allen, people with bigger arms that could maybe alleviate or help reconcile and boost the receivers a bit more, even though they're not getting the separation that any of us, especially I'm sure Kyle Shanahan, want to see. So that leads us into the preview. Dallas coming to San Francisco, Sunday Night Football. The Niners open up as a 5-point favorite. Okay. 3-3 Dallas, 3-4 San Francisco. Big game for both teams. Both teams need a win. The Cowboys got absolutely embarrassed at home by Detroit before their bye. Dallas coming off of a bye, much like the Chiefs did last week. And I know a lot has been made of that rest disadvantage that the 49ers are going to have. Hey, it's the hand you're dealt. You just got to deal with it. With the Rams winning last night, the Niners need this win to get out of the cellar in the NFC West. And they could still find themselves in the basement coming off of their bye. Should the Rams beat Seattle 9 days from now, if the Cardinals keep winning. So 4-4 feels a whole lot better than 3-5 if the Niners can get there. And for the Cowboys, they want to keep pace with the Eagles, stay within striking distance of the Commanders, and they want to prove that they can beat San Francisco. Not like this is any sort of guarantee. Oh, they'll see them. This will be a matchup, a playoff preview matchup, because the way that both teams are middling right now, that very well might not be the case. But the Cowboys are to the Niners as the Niners are to the Chiefs, right? It's the team that another team can't beat. Chiefs have won 5 straight against Kyle, 4 straight when Kyle's had a good team. The 2018 team was not a good team. The game that Jimmy got injured in Arrowhead. And Dallas has lost the last 3 to San Francisco when they've had a good team. Again, it was, I think, 2018 or maybe 2020 when the Niners lost to Dallas. It might have been 2018. I think it was a 41-33 game in Santa Clara before the Niners became a relevant and good team. One thing, I just want to conclude with the Rams with this whole Brock Purdy slander, people doubting him, looking at the pass game specifically against the Chiefs, of questioning if you're going to give a contract. There was some talk, and it wasn't serious, of, do you trade Brock Purdy? Trading Brock Purdy is essentially surrendering the season, and it will never, ever, ever, ever happen. But people, midbrains, Twitter twats on social media, trade Purdy, or you keep him, let him play out his final year, don't extend him, and draft another quarterback. See what Tanner Mordecai has, or draft another quarterback, whether it's in the first round or whatever, and just keep cycling through rookie quarterbacks and go cheap there so you can surround him with an all-star cast. All right, so how many rookie quarterbacks are drafted every year? How many pan out overall? Not many. How many pan out in the first round? Probably less than 50%, maybe in the 40 to 50% range. If you can guarantee me, if you had a crystal ball, and you can guarantee that the Niners drafting God knows who in the second, third, fourth round, even the first round next year, would have the immediate impact that Brock Purdy does, then I say if you can guarantee it to me, you absolutely do it. And then 4 years after that, do it again, and you can guarantee it, you absolutely do it. But you can't. and it's a crapshoot, and there's a very low hit rate on quarterbacks. And when you find one, you do everything you can to not let them leave unless they're Deshaun Watson and they're just a disgusting sexual predator. And karma's a bitch. Achilles snapped. But again, the Brock discussion on, how quickly everybody was praising him for what he did in the Rams game, not having the full weapons, throwing 2 or 3 touchdowns, and the Niners losing that game, or 3 touchdowns, right? I guess it was all to Juwan Jennings, and looking bad against the Chiefs defense without literally their top 3 receivers, bringing in young players and other players that don't get nearly the snaps, still not having Christian McCaffrey, having again, I go back to an undermanned Niner defense against a Steve Spagnuolo offense is no match. And a Nick Sorensen-led defense against an Andy Reid-led offense is not really a match either, especially when you're missing Hargrave, Greenlaw, and Hufanga, although, again, Mustafa is filling in more than admirably. Let's go back to last night's game. Matt Stafford. Now, the Rams aren't as nationally relevant as the Niners are. People in Los Angeles don't even really, a lot of people in LA don't even care about the Rams, all that much. But look at the difference of Matthew Stafford without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, and him last night with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Kupp had a touchdown. Demarcus Robinson, as the number 3 or 4 receiver, had 2 touchdowns. Stafford shredded the Vikings, the vaunted Vikings defense. And thanks a lot, Vikings defense on fantasy getting me 2 points. Kyren Williams got me 22, so I'll take that. But do you think, guys, players matter? Stafford, not good without his weapons. Stafford, very good with his weapons. What a shock. And you can say that for basically any quarterback ever who has ever played the position. Does the mental expectation change for Brock Purdy without Debo and Ayuk and Jennings last week? Like, in his mind and in Kyle's mind, it's like, shit, we got to find a way to get it done. But don't you think Kyle's play calling changed without those 3 receivers? Knowing Debo wasn't going to go 4 plays into it and then losing Ayuk mid-second quarter, don't you think that changes Kyle's play calling? Absolutely. Do you think that changes Steve Spagnuolo's play calling on defense? Absolutely. Would their game plan maybe looked a little bit different if Kyle knew going into the Chiefs game that they wouldn't have had those 3 players? Sure, right? You have to game plan it up differently. Would the outcome change? No. And the fact that it was only a 10-point loss and should have been a 1-possession game if Anders doesn't miss the extra point, it should have been a 28-20 game. And yeah, a late score at the end to make it 28-20, but the Niners would have been in it. And not excusing Purdy's 3 interceptions. And the last one was really bad, even though he did get hit and it might have redirected the ball into a Chiefs, defender, but that might have been picked anyway. You just can't take chances and get yourself out of putting 3 on the board when that could have made it a 1-possession game. Let's just go back to real quick. Stafford without weapons, bad. And Stafford's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Hall of Fame quarterback. Are we saying that about Brock Purdy? Not yet. No, I shouldn't say. Yeah, well, both are true. No, and not yet. Who knows 10 years from now? And Stafford with his weapons, yay, better. God, man, you guys are, and I know it is some Twitter fans, emotional Niner fans. Purdy's crap, Shanahan's crap, this is crap. We had an example last night against one of the top defenses in the league that puts constant pressure on. The Vikings probably would have won that game without those 2 receivers. Stafford would not have thrown 4 touchdowns without those 2 receivers. I'm speaking truths. And I pride myself on having one of the smartest, if not the smartest audience out there. You guys get it, but I'm just saying it. Not like it's going to influence anybody that's not hearing it, but players matter. And it was on display last night for the Rams. Now let's get back to this preview, the injuries for Dallas. Micah Parsons looking like he's not going to play. Cornerback Deron Bland is on IR but eligible to return. He did not practice either. Parsons in on Thursday. So those two very important players for the defense might not play against San Francisco. The only other one for Dallas, kicker Brandon Aubrey, and I have him in fantasy. I don't know if it's the same fantasy leagues. I have Kyron Williams or whatnot, but he's undergoing jury duty. So, I guess that's why he was available. He's the best kicker, him and Justin Tucker, in the NFL. He was available in one of my leagues, so I picked him up. Like, oh, is he going to be available for the Niner game? Now, I don't want to laugh too much about kickers and what it takes for them to get ready, because look at the Niners special team situation. It's abysmal. They're shit. So I guess we as Niner fans are a bit sensitive to it, or maybe should have more empathy. But he is a goddamn kicker. He is a very good kicker. He is apparently getting work in after jury duty. He is going to fly out with the team. I mean, I think Brandon Aubrey is a type of player that, even if he doesn't kick for literally doesn't kick for 2 or 3 days, he can just roll out of bed and be really friggin' good. So I don't think there's any chance that Brandon Aubrey misses that game, but it's late enough it doesn't even matter when it's going to be played on Sunday, because if for some reason he doesn't play, I'll just drop in and pick up Anders Carlson for the Niners just to have a kicker, but I can't. It's so laughable. I just can't imagine it being a thing. Now, for the Niners defensively, Jennings did not practice. He's probably not going to play. Kevin Givens did not practice with a groin injury, which, again, it wasn't just Ayuk going on IR and opening up the roster spot. There is an injury at defensive tackle, which made the Evan Anderson promotion to the 53 logical. And Debo has a chance, which is a testament to his healing, his rehabilitation, his toughness, wanting to be out there. Has a chance. Not guaranteed, but again, if I'm Kyle, this should not be a Debo specific game plan, but if you do build in a handful of plays, 3, 4, 5 for Debo, you have Cowing working as his understudy and running those plays as well. I mentioned earlier, the Niners have won the last 3 against Dallas, 2 in the playoffs, 1 in Dallas, 1 in San Francisco last year. And that includes last year, the Niners cooking the Cowboys completely on Sunday Night Football, 42-10. I can't imagine this game being anywhere close to that, because these are 2 comparable middling teams. The stars. Let's go through them on Dallas. Dak Prescott on the year, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a quarterback I have in my other fantasy league. Thanks so much. Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott at running back. Not too much to fear there. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert at receiver, and Ferguson at tight end. Now, the Cowboys are undergoing or working through some injuries, just as well, maybe not as many, but some significant ones for them, especially on defense. They have 3 DNs on IR. DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Williams, and rookie Marshawn Nealand. So they're not playing. If Parsons doesn't go, their pass rush is, even with Parsons, their pass rush is taking a hit with missing those 3 players. Parsons gone, I don't want to say that it's going to be non-existent, because they'll find a way to get to Purdy. They'll find a way to, just the way that this Niners season is going, to beat McKivitz, somehow beat, Williams. We are guaranteeing nothing here, right? Like a Sean McVay-led offense without Nakua and Cooper Kupp still found a way to beat the Niners, right? And Deron Bland at corner, you still have Trayvon Diggs. Does Bland not playing affect how much man that the Cowboys play? I don't know, but I still just go back to, if you see this is a team that struggles so much with man, just employ it. We're not going to say, what do you have to lose? It's not like they're the Panthers, which that they're going nowhere, or the Giants, or the Patriots. Like, let's just keep throwing at the Niners what they have difficulty scheming against or getting players open. But I think there's still something to that the Cowboys should probably play man more than 50% of the time, right? I know this isn't Madden, and you just can't do that and expect it to work, but do it until you can show me you consistently can beat it. And with Jennings out, with Ayuk out, with young players behind them, with Debo not 100%, he can't beat man when he's 100%. Consistently beat man. We can't say he never beats man. That would be disingenuous. But I think Kyle should have man beaters in there. A lot of them. And a lot was made this week about, fans listening to, and I heard it myself, press conference where Brock, he didn't overtly say he's not allowed to audible. Let's clarify that. What he did say was, more often than not, they have something built into the play where they can beat zone, they can beat a blitz, they can beat an overload. And I think his quote was like, very rarely do I get to the line and I see the defensive look and I'm like, oh shoot, dang, they got us. It's like we have stuff built in. I don't know how often Brock changes the offensive line protections, if at all. I do not know. No one's charting how often he's audibleizing out of a play. You hear Brock say, kill, kill, kill sometimes. So that means he called 2 plays in the huddle and they're killing the first one. So that's an audible. He's doing it. He's just not doing it with the frequency of like Peyton Manning. How many people are Peyton Manning? Remember all the mind games he had with, Ray Lewis and defensive coordinators and others? He would go up there and he had the freedom to do that. Maybe as Brock gets more comfortable in Kyle's system, that is his next step in growth as a quarterback, but it's not there, obviously, fully right now. Not a huge deal. But this should be a revenge game for the 49ers, or at least fans, because the Cowboys at linebacker, even though he's questionable, Eric Kendricks, remember, he's the linebacker that the Niners signed in the offseason, or we're going to sign. Then he backed out, went to Dallas for more playing time, and that brought in everybody's favorite doormat, Devondre Campbell. So the Niners should, they got to win this game for a lot of reasons, but a nice FU to Eric Kendricks along the way wouldn't be bad. Now, this is a Cowboys defense. I mentioned missing 3 defensive ends, possibly an outside linebacker in Parsons this game, 14 sacks on the year. That's not even 2.5 a game. 3 of them came from DeMarcus Lawrence, who's not playing. And they've generated 4 interceptions on the year, 1 by Deron Blandon. He's not playing. He may not play this game. Cowboys started out, and everybody thought they were looking good. They went to Cleveland, beat them by, I think, like 33-14, something like that. But little did we know that Cleveland is shit and Dallas is not nearly as good as advertised. They got routed at home the next week by New Orleans, got down big to Baltimore, again, at home the following week before ultimately losing, won at the Giants. So what? Surprisingly, won at Pittsburgh, and then got rolled by the Lions at home last week. Overall, offensively, they're 12th in the league, 2nd passing, averaging 259 a game, dead last running the ball, averaging only 77 a game, and 20th in points scored, averaging 21 a game. Defensively, not good. 25th overall, 19th against the pass, 28th against the run, allowing 143 a game, and 31st in points allowed, allowing 28. Turnover margin, Dallas is at the bottom of the league, near the bottom of the league, not dead last at -6. Niners are at +2. Kickoffs and punt returns. Dallas, the number 1 kickoff return team, averaging 34.2 per kickoff return, and number 2 in punt returns, averaging 19.2. What does this mean? Kick the goddamn ball out of bounds. Wishnowski on punt returns. Kick returns, I mean, it's just up to Anders Carlson if he can get it into the end zone. And even then, so, like, if you're Dallas and it's Devontae Turpin, I don't know who else they have at kick returner, even if it's in the end zone, take it out. It's not even like take your chances against the Niners D. It's the Niners D taking their kick return unit, taking their chances of stopping Turpin before the 30. Do you like that? I don't. But punt returns, kick it out of bounds. I would rather have a 35 or 40-yard net punted out of bounds than trying to kick it inside the numbers or, give it 4 or 5 seconds of hang time and cause a fair catch. Because if that gets screwed up, what we saw happen against the Chiefs last week, Hardman taking one across the field for a big return, could happen multiple times this week against Dallas. Which brings us to keys to the game. I've said it twice before. I'm going to say it a third time. Will they play majority man-to-man defense? Make Purdy and the receivers, undermanned receiver group, earn it. I read you guys the stats, the separation, where they rank. Even without someone potentially like Deron Bland, are they going to run man? Mike Zimmer-led defense, it's going to be mixed in. They're not playing zone all game. I mean, again, I read you the stats on how great Purdy is dicing up a zone. Even probably without Jennings, with a limited Debo, without Ayuk, and without McCaffrey, maybe he doesn't have a top quarterback rating in the league, this week, but damn well might be near 100 or a little over 100. Defensively, though, for the Niners, can you keep Dallas under 100 rushing yards? They're averaging 77 a game. The Cowboys have only gone over 100 twice, and it's barely over 100, like 102 and 109. They did it, though, at Pittsburgh, 3 weeks ago. And they ran it 31 times for 109 yards. If they can run, I don't want to say if they can run on Pittsburgh, they can run on anybody, but if they can run on Pittsburgh, they can run on San Francisco. Otherwise, the Niners have held the Jets, the Patriots, and the Seahawks under 100 yards. That was Jets week 1 with Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays and not giving Breece Hall the ball because he's a moron. That's New England, who had a pretty good running game going into that game, but I guess the Niners were ready for it. And Seattle, who just refuses to really hand the ball off much at all. And they did hold the Rams to 98 yards in their loss in Los Angeles, but it was pretty close. Like, the Rams not gaining 98 and the Cowboys gaining 102 or 109. Is it really that far off? Do I think that they're going to hold the Cowboys under their average of 77 yards per game? No. And it's not because I have Rico Dowdle on one of my fantasy teams, and I probably am going to be forced to start him. Unfortunately, I mean, I will root against him. I don't, fantasy, I don't give a shit. I want the Niners to completely bottle up the Cowboys, or at least completely bottle up the run. But do we feel confident as fans after watching the Niners give up 184 to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs were a middle third rush offense? Do we feel confident like, oh, the Cowboys are dead last in running the ball, we don't have to worry about that? Absolutely not. And I can see a situation or a world where the Cowboys do run it over 100 yards because the passing game is so explosive. And that leads to key 2, limiting Dak and CeeDee Lamb. At Pittsburgh, again, a very good defense, and it was a low-scoring game. Dak went for 352, 2 touchdowns, but he did throw 2 interceptions. CeeDee is averaging 5 catches per game and 78 yards per game. And they have Cooks and Jake Ferguson and Turpin. They have weapons. They have route runners. They have speed. They have players in the middle of the field and against linebackers, Ferguson and others, which are going to be nightmare matchups for Devondre Campbell and others. They go 3 deep at tight end. Luke Schoonmaker and I think it's like Spanford, a rookie out of Minnesota, both have receptions. I think Schoonmaker has 8 and Ford has 2. So they're going to throw multiple tight ends at San Francisco, multiple tight ends that are viable options in the passing game, unlike anything that the Niners throw out behind Kittle. And defensively, get to Dak. He's been sacked 13 times in 6 games, so a little over 2 times a game, right? So it's not like, even with the Cowboys line certainly not generating much in the running game, they're protecting Dak pretty well. But Dak has thrown 2 interceptions in 3 separate games. Can they get to Dak? Dak is one of those, I'll say, fringe quarterbacks in terms of the, when I've said, rushing 4 and dropping 7 will work against the vast majority of quarterbacks in the league, probably 20 to 23, but it won't work against the other, 9 to 12. Dak is on that fringe 9 to 12 that can make San Francisco pay. He's a very good quarterback. Yeah, he gets a lot of heat for not, leading the Cowboys past the divisional round. And they haven't gotten to an NFC championship game since their Super Bowl year in 1995. I get all that. But he is a good enough year that a quarterback that any game he can go off, right? He's probably Is it safe to say he's going to have a better game against the Niners than Mahomes did last week? I think that's very fair to say. The Cowboys at receiver are putting much more out there on the field than the Chiefs did. I don't anticipate at all. Well, the Niners may get, a pick or two, but I think Prescott's going to throw a touchdown or two. I don't think I'm starting him in fantasy. I think I'm going to go with Jared Goff, but I think they need to find some sort of happy medium between dropping 7, which again, apparently they're statistically or analytics wise, the Niners are ranking near the top of the league in pass defense efficiency, but also sending pressure at him, because I don't think they're going to get there consistently with 4. I don't know a game this year where they're going to really get there consistently with 4. It just hasn't happened in quite a while. So that's the defensive keys. On offense, I'm going to sound like a broken record, run it 30 goddamn times. Then do I think the Niners are going to get to the Cowboys rush defense average of 143 a game? No. I think having an extra week to prepare, I think Cowboys are going to look at what all teams have done against San Francisco, but the successful ones. What did the Vikings do? What did the Chiefs do? Do they have the same personnel? No, they're beset by injuries on defense. But could they run a 5 or 6 man line? Of course. You don't need your starting DNs to do that. You just put 5 linemen and a linebacker on the D line. Go heavy when it looks like San Francisco is going to run. I think the Niners will go over 100 yards. I think they might end up in the 125 range. I just don't feel comfortable that I think they're going to try to run it 30 plus times. I think they'll get close. I think Kyle is still enamored with the downfield passing game, and Brock's enamored with the downfield passing game and is a confident quarterback, that they're still, regardless of who's out there at receiver, going to push the ball downfield. And that's going to be my third key. And we'll get there. So I don't know if Kyle's going to have the patience to really lean into the 30 plus rushes. And again, if he does, how does he get there? Is he going to give Mason 20 plus carries? Another week removed from the injury. He's not on the injury report at all. So his shoulder, you're not going to say his shoulder is okay, but it's okay enough. So if he gets 20, are you going to get 5 plus from Gruendo? If Debo plays, do you actually hand it off to him, or do you conserve his energy completely at receiver where they are thin? Because obviously Ayuk's out and Jennings probably isn't going to play. But if you're running the ball more in that 30 range, that also means I want to see more play action. Not only from shotgun, where it's that hike, quick fake to Mason and throwing it, that counts as play action, but I want to see your traditional Brock turning his back to the defense types of plays. Even if it's a 5-man line, let them crash. But as soon as you turn around, Brock, you very well may be under pressure in that type of scenario, because 5, 6, 7 are going to crash and someone may come free or be getting to Brock. Have a quick out. Where are the hot reads? If it is true, and I'd like to believe Brock, and it probably is true, that most of the time Shanahan draws up plays so well that there is a blitz beater, a man beater, something. They have an answer in there. Find the answer quicker. Get the ball out of your hands. You saw last night, Stafford more so than Darnold, but was Stafford sacked last night against the Vikings? This is a team that blitzes heavily. The Rams O-line did a really nice job picking up the blitz, but McVay also dialed up quick hitters to get the ball out of Stafford's hands to mitigate the rush. They need that. It doesn't have to be a tunnel screen or a wide receiver screen to Debo or Cowan. Do that, but something quick to a Kittle or, God forbid, another tight end. Where's the screen pass? Where are the checkdowns? They went from 5 checkdowns total receptions against Seattle to, I think, 1 or 2 last week against Kansas City. They have a diverse offense. They have a creative offense, one that obviously sputters in the red zone. All right, let's jump to number 3. Take what the defense is giving you, Brock. You don't have to push the ball downfield as much. And yeah, deep shot to Cowan, deep shot to Kittle, the deep ends, hope ends. How much of those intermediate ends going to be there without Ayuk? He was the best route runner for that. Can Debo get open on that with another week of practice? Is it something that Pearsall can do? Cowing, Conley, forget Ronnie Bell for now. If the shots are there, you take them downfield, but don't push it unnecessarily. Don't push the ball downfield in an iffy situation when the check down's there to Juice, to Mason, to Guerrero, to Kittle, to Saubert. Get it out quick. Maybe this is the game where, and it really would depend on how Dallas is playing it, the yak situation against man happens, a bit farther downfield, right? You have to beat man, hit your receiver in stride and let him continue the play after the catch. These zones, these tunnel screens and shorter stuff, especially horizontal behind the line of scrimmage, generally works better against zone. But it's okay to still be a highly efficient passer by taking what the defense gives you. And that is still defined by deep shots if the defense is giving that. But intermediate to shorter and even 7 yards, 5 yards within the line of scrimmage, that's okay. Get it out. Let your playmakers do stuff. The way you get back to being a better yak offense is drawing up and we'll say settling for, in air quotes, players and patterns and routes that are closer to the line of scrimmage because you have a better chance for yak, generally speaking. And to that point, let's utilize Pearsall and Cowing more. A week where they should have more of a full reps and practice slate. Look at what Andy Reid did last week with Xavier Worthy and Mecole Hardman. Where are the sweeps? Where are the handoffs? Where are the reverses to Cowing? You could probably do it to Pearsall too. He's quick, but Cowing's the fastest one on your offense. Take your deep shots again when they're there. But you're giving the young players, the young and, more dynamic players than Conley, than Bell. You're giving them playing time, utilize their skill set. Not to say that they're going to have a handful of plays drawn up for Pearsall and Cowing specifically. Kyle might, but I could also understand if he doesn't. But utilize, and if this helps out in the red zone, if this helps out on third downs, fine. And then a soft fourth is use your legs, Brock. Be decisive and use your legs. I don't see you running it 10 times, but if he does, take it. If it's 10 for 40, 10 for 50, and you're averaging that out to 4 or 5 yards a carry, and you're staying ahead of the sticks, maybe Brock will have a little bit more of that mindset, knowing that Ayuk is out and Jennings is probably not going to be there. Not to say it's a trust issue, but if it's okay if you don't trust these other receivers as much as he trusts players that he's played with more, that would just make sense. That's okay. And if that slight mistrust leads to Brock running more and staying ahead of the sticks and picking up third downs, I'm totally okay with that. Now, as for prediction, I mentioned earlier that this is nowhere as many, I'm predicting 4 or 5 touchdowns from Brock and they're going to spank Dallas. And yes, Kittle wearing the fuck Dallas shirt and all that stuff. Yes. And this is a big game for many reasons for both teams, and playoff wise, a bigger game than the Chief game because this is an NFC game. This is a head-to-head game that if the Niners don't win the West, and if they don't win the West, they're not making the playoffs, but it's a team that you would want the head-to-head against for wildcard seeding. But these are two middling teams, guys. This game can go either way. The Niners have injuries on O and D. The Cowboys have injuries mainly on D, and it's mainly to a D line and a linebacker in Deron Bland that could help jumpstart the passing game, protections for Brock, and maybe even help in the red zone if the Niners O-line can hold and give Purdy time in the red zone, keep him clean, giving him an extra second, or the receivers an extra second to get open. And obviously this is a Dallas team that San Francisco can run on. I'm going to be pessimistic after I was illogically optimistic in my prediction against the Chiefs. I'm going to be pessimistic here in terms of how much the Niners are going to win by. I'm taking the Niners 27-23. I think Dallas is explosive enough offensively, maybe not in the running game, but explosive enough with Dak and CD and others to score 20 plus on this San Francisco defense. And what's scary is if they are explosive through the air, that will open up the ground game. It works both ways. Running the ball opens up the pass, passing the ball opens up the run. But I think San Francisco, and again, Jennings up in the air, probably not going to play. Debo up in the air, leaning towards, or it's looking like he will play in some limited capacity. Debo not playing will probably change things. Again, what Debo are you getting? 80 to 90%. But I think the Niners do enough, whether they have Dak under constant duress or not, to win the game. Now, the unspoken things are win the time of possession battle, win the turnover battle. Those are two huge things. And that goes for any game against any team. Penalties, third down conversions, can't be 2 for 11 on offense. Can't be 8 for 13 or 8 for 14, whatever the Chiefs were last week. Can't be that. So you got to hold. These are all, again, these are givens for any game. Special teams for the Niners is a given any game. They suck at special teams. They let up big punt returns or kick returns. They miss extra points or field goals. Going to be difficult because you're letting teams hang around. But I think San Francisco does enough to get a win, goes into the bye at 4-4. And we're going to talk about the bye week and the upcoming schedule, but I'm just going to leave the Niners. I'm going to leave you fans with this. Looking at their upcoming 3 games, their 3 NFC games: at home for Dallas, at Tampa, and at home for Seattle. Very good chance that the Niners can win the next 3. Then the national conversation is going to change from what's wrong with the Niners to, oh, here come the Niners. Here come the Niners again, starting slow. What 2 or 3 games can do for the outlook on a team and what the pundits are saying, because it's a week-to-week league. They have Dallas coming in, a team that they have won 3 straight times, a team that is banged up. They go to Tampa Bay. Look at the unfortunate break that the Niners are getting. Unfortunate for Tampa. Chris Godwin done for the year. Mike Evans out until week 11. So they're facing a team without their 2 starting wide receivers. The last time that happened, they lost to the Rams. Actually, the last time that happened, it was against the Chiefs and they lost. Last time that then it happened against the Rams. So maybe that's not a good thing for San Francisco, but weapon-wise, you would rather have that than both of them playing. And then Seattle at home, and the Niners have owned the Seahawks recently and Geno Smith. So 3-4, with a real possibility to be 6-4 a month from now. Starts one game at a time, right? Got Dallas in a couple games. Historic franchise, historic rivalry, a historic team that we all just say, fuck them, including what George Kittle does. Go out and take care of business against a team that I want to say they should beat, but they're both middling teams. Get that win, go to 4-4, get into the bye, and figure out what you want to do, if anything, on the trade market. Maybe McCaffrey gets healthy to come back for the Seattle game. And then you take your chances and you make your run. We shall see. So that concludes the 49ers podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. World Series begins tonight. Yankees at Dodgers, game 1 on Friday night. Go Dodgers. NBA, NHL, obviously in swing also. Whatever you are doing between now and Sunday night, enjoy it. Hopefully the game goes the way that we want, and frankly, the way that the Niners need it to go. And we will talk again on a Monday in our reaction show podcast. So hopefully a 4-4 team getting healthier in the bye between now and then. Stay happy, healthy, and safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.